This person asked me on Discord, what is the highest ROI in AI work that one can do with their trading? So we've got review process speed up, teaching AI to trade for you, live gathering data, past trades review. And what would you recommend to start with automating / semi-automating to an intermediate trader? And what would your approach look like? What is step 1, 2, 3, etc.? Okay, so quick context. What are we actually trying to achieve here? We're trying to increase the output of a system, right? That's basically what the goal is. Whenever I'm trying to increase the output of a system, I would always go through these 4 steps in this specific order. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Eliminate, automate, delegate, innovate. And the reason why it's in this order is based on the risk or the cost associated with trying to discover a successful input within that domain, which actually increases my output. What I mean by that is it's going to be a lot easier to discover something that is harmful to your output and then execute the process of eliminating it, rather than using your creative juices to discover a completely brand new thing, completely unrelated to whatever is in your system already, like something brand new, and then go and introduce it into your system. It's really hard to do this. It's a lot easier to do that, right? Okay, so I'll quickly go through eliminate. So eliminate, we're just trying to do less bad stuff. So we just look at the stuff that we are working on. We look at the ROI of the thing that we are working on. And if it turns out that something is actually harming our output, then we identify it based on the data that we have. And then we just simply stop doing it. We stop giving it our time and attention. So example, if let's say, every single time that I post a political, or I do every single time, actually, no, I won't go talk in Twitter terms, I'll talk in trading terms, because this is a trading question. Every single time that I trade during the FOMC, I get my average slippage per trade goes up by 20 times, right? So if I simply stop trading during FOMC, or like plus or minus 1 hour before after an FOMC announcement, I will make more money. So that's just like an easy peasy one. And innovate is I'm trying to create a brand new strategy from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to go through this process, and let's say I've already exhausted all the obvious things that are harming my performance. And the next thing that I'm going to be looking at is what can I automate? So once we've eliminated all the harmful stuff from a system, what we have left is stuff that is actually increasing our output. So let's say we have task 1, task 2, task 3, and task 4. So we have these 4 tasks, right? And they all help us in some kind of way. But if this question is being asked, what is the highest ROI out of these 4 tasks to improve or do more of? The reason why this question is being asked is because we don't have enough information on each of these 4 tasks. So the first immediate thing that we need to do is we need to go and get some data on each of these 4 tasks. That way we can have a better understanding of what out of these 4, which actually is going to be the highest ROI thing to do. So we're going to grade the tasks based on how complex is the task to complete from start to finish, based on like how long it takes or how difficult the steps are to execute. So for example, let's say a task which takes you like 4 hours to do and requires a lot of subjectivity in order to really get it done correctly, or there's like a lot of steps in there which are discretionary or require like a very high level of expertise, or required for you to be proficient in a lot of sub skills or a different set of meta skills, that task might be graded as an A. Whereas something that is not very complex and maybe doesn't take a lot of time would be a D. So these ones are really hard to do. These ones are really easy to do. So we want to start with the low-hanging fruit. So we would isolate what are the easiest tasks to do. And those are the ones that we automate, because the complexity required to automate that task is very low. And if we succeed in automating that task, we get the time back or we get a large percentage of the time back from completing that task, right? So we can grade the complexity of the task. That's like one metric or one variable. I'll just say V1. So how complex is the task to complete? And then the variable 2 is how much time do you think we would say, like, what is the ROI? How much time saved are we going to get back if we succeed in automating that task? So task D, we might get 30 minutes of time back. Task A, it might be much harder to do, but it might actually have an equal amount of time saved if we succeed in automating it, right? So when we're looking at two tasks, we're measuring which one is going to be easier to automate or which one is going to be higher ROI to automate. If they have different complexity, or one has a higher complexity but equal amount of time, then this one is the one that should be automated, because we can get the 30 minutes of time back by spending less time on actually going to build out the automation. Okay, for example, pretend that task 1 has 100 steps in the SOP, in the workflow. So like first we have to do this, then we have to do another thing, then we have to do another thing, then we have to do some other step, then we have to check a screener, then we have to like check the sync of the most recent price action, right? There's like 100 different steps that we have to do in order, like step by step. Like if we were trying to teach a child, like a 10-year-old, to do this task, how many steps are actually in that thing? And then for task 4, maybe there's only 10 steps to do, right? So this one, very complex. This one, very simple. This one saves you 30 minutes. This one saves you 30 minutes. So which one is easier to build? This one is easier to build, but this one gets, okay. So what is the ROI per average 1 minute? That's like a better metric to think about. Let me delete that. Okay, so how many minutes are we saving per one step, right? Like look at the complexity. So it's the complexity or average minutes saved per one step in the workflow. So this one is going to be, we get 3, and this one is 0.3. So this one is higher than this. Therefore, this one is the higher ROI task to automate. Whereas you might have a different example where, let's say, hypothetically, let's say you have something that looks like this, okay? Because in a more realistic situation, different tasks are going to take different amounts of time. So what is the ROI per one step that you have to cleanly automate? Because an automation is just automating a series of steps. There's like, when you succeed in automating this, what you've really succeeded in is automating 10 different, like this first we have to do this. So there's 10 steps in the automation, whereas this one might have like 100 steps. So what is the average ROI per one step in the automation? This one is 6. This one is 3. Therefore, this one is the higher ROI thing to do. So this is a data attribution problem. So what I mean by that is, if you don't know which of these is actually the highest ROI thing to do, like if you don't know what the highest ROI thing next to do is, then the default answer to this question, so default answer to this question is get data on the workflows themselves. Specifically, how many steps do you actually need to take in order to complete that tasks? So what is the total number of steps to complete the task? So that is going to be the measurement of how complex is the task to complete. And then the second thing is, what is the average number of minutes to complete the task? And then look at both of the variables together, get an average score, and this score is going to be like the complexity score, and then the one which scores the highest, that's going to be the one that you will want to automate, because there is no objective answer to know which one for sure is the easiest one to do, right? It really just depends on how much are you actually spending to do each of these things. But here, like the approach that I would recommend to take is start with automating the tasks which have the lowest complexity to automate, because as this number goes up, as the complexity of the task goes up, the failure rate in succeeding to automate it is also going to go up, because as the number of steps goes up, the more opportunity there is for the AI to screw up or get something wrong. So the more likelihood, the higher the likelihood that something fails, right? The less steps, if there's only literally one step to automate, then the higher the chance that the automation succeeds, right? So therefore, just start with the ones which require the least operational complexity. Start with automating those. You might be able to know which one is the highest ROI, but maybe you don't want to tackle this one because how good you are at automating things might be low. Like if you are not an engineer by default, or you don't have much experience with automating stuff in general, then don't go for the huge things straight away, because being able to automate something is a meta skill in of itself, right? And if you have a very low skill of automating something, then you might actually screw up with trying to automate this. So just identify what are your D rank tasks, what are the ones which have the least operational complexity to automate. I wouldn't even stress too much about the time saved. Just look at the ones which have the least amount of operational complexity to automate and just start with automating those. So, okay, let's go through the answer before I wrap this video up. So, step 1, get data on your tasks. Understand how complex is the task, how many steps does it actually take to complete the task, and how long does the task take you to actually finish from start to finish. So do that for all of your tasks. Rank them based on complexity. If you're really confident with automating stuff, you can just go right off the bat and try to automate like the huge tasks. Like, I would not recommend that though. I would personally just get all of the easy peasy stuff out of the way, get familiar with the process of automation, and then gradually work your way up. And as you work your way up, you're going to hit some roadblocks, you're going to hit some ceilings, because once you if the complexity of automating something is higher than what your skill of automation is, right? Let's say how good you are at automating something. Your limit is you only know how to automate something which has 50 steps, up to 50 steps. Once a workflow or once a SOP has more than 50 steps, you really start to struggle. Like, bugs come out, you can't get the output that you want. That's where the limitations of your automations lie. That's when you move to the next step and you move into delegation, and that's where you get a human to basically compensate for the leftovers. And instead of having an AI or a bot go through the motions, you have a human do it, but you're just going to have to explain to the human. And the reason why delegate is under automate is because this one is going to cost you moolah. This one is going to cost you money. And it's also going to cost you some operational drag because you're going to have to onboard a new human and also get them, like, you're going to have to go through the culture fit, the whole shenanigans. Maybe you onboard the wrong guy and there's a cost with that. And maybe you have to, like, get three guys, like three bad guys, and fire them before you get like one good guy. Right? Because remember, trading is a team sport. Maybe you hire someone to do research for you, right? Maybe you would rather have a human do research for you than AI, right? So I hope that answers the question. So yeah, get data on your tasks. How hard is it to complete? How long does it take to complete? Rank them by complexity, and from there just work from the D's all the ways up to the A's. And once you hit a limit, then you might look into delegation. All right, sweet. I think that covered it. Oh no, I forgot to mention the last part of the question. My bad. So I can't give you an objective answer, but what I can do, because ideally I actually try to answer this question, like which one of these do I think it's going to be? So without looking at the data, if I had to take a wild guess, actually, you know what? Instead of me trying to answer it directly for you, I'm going to try to answer it directly for myself. So I know for a fact that in order, like, what are we trying to do in trading? Okay, what are we trying to do? We're either executing or we're doing research and development. So we're trying to improve our edge, or we're trying to execute more trades. I'm not constrained here. I don't care about executing more trades. This doesn't matter too much to me. I could, but I want to nail it before I scale it. I want to get like a really, really, I want to get in a really confident place with the types of strategies that I'm running before I go absolutely ballistic on trying to scale something. So I would actually, me personally, I would rather put a lot more effort into R&D than on execution, because me personally, I recognize when I accept the harsh reality that trading is very similar to a software business. And because of that, the P&L curve might look something like this, where it's a hockey stick effect. So for an extended period of time, we're just in the trenches, and then we have a brilliant aha moment where we have an insanely strong edge, and then we start looking for funding, external funding, or we just bootstrap the funding internally. But once we have a really strong edge, we're no longer constrained by the edge itself, and we can just go shove as much capital as possible into that portfolio. So I'm more thinking in terms of how can I improve the edge itself rather than how can I just take more trades with the strategy. Therefore, me personally, I'm looking more into the R&D stuff rather than just taking more trades. I think this is where I am personally constrained with my trading. Therefore, the types of inputs and the types of workflows that I'm going to be looking at aren't going to be to do with execution. So that rules this one out for me. I'm going to be looking a lot more into things to do with improving my edge. So this means researching, collecting data, reviewing data, or running live tests of ideas. So we have the idea, so coming up with ideas. We have the data collection, we have the data review, and then we have like do we push it into live testing, yes or no, right? Yeah, I'll just say yes or no for the live testing. So okay, I am not constrained here. I have a giant like list of stuff that I want to test, and it's just sitting on the bench, and I just can't test it because each of these ideas takes so long for me to test, right? To go through the entire motion. So What is the next step? Collecting data. This takes me a really long time to do, right? It takes me a really, really, really long time to do. I like I've been doing a lot of this manually, so probably this is for me where my constraint is. And if my goal was I want to really level up my trading, which currently it's not. Right now, my goal is I want to build my crypto personal brand, because I think that is the constraint to my cash flow at the moment. Once cash flow is no longer the constraint, and then I think that the constraint that's really holding me back is my current level of skill of trading. The way that I would approach that is like if I wanted to level that up, what I would do is I would address the data collection. So I would look into how can I use AI to speed up the process for how I collect and scrape very large amounts of data. So that's the thing that I would be looking at. So how do I get a live updating database of all of the altcoin perps? How can I build a playground or an environment where I can just come up with an idea and very quickly just get the stats on that idea. If I just ask the question, like, how quickly can I go from ideas to I have analytics on that idea? What is the lag on that? So, for example, if I say, how many bullish engulfing candles were there on Solana on the 7 hour time frame? Dot, 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 right? So how much time it takes me to answer that question. I want to bring that number down as close to 0 as possible, right? Imagine I bring that number down to like 60 seconds, right? And then I have an AI agent. I feed like let's say I get an AI agent to I give it rules for how it comes up with ideas. And then it passes all of those ideas to another agent, which has a specific workflow for how it generates entry and exit rules, which are based on that idea or a theory, to go for future testing. So maybe, let's say I have an agent which comes up with, let's say, 70 ideas per week. I have another agent which takes one of those ideas and then comes up with 100 variations of 100 variations of entry and exit rules, which are based on that theory. Then I have another agent which plugs in, which takes that data and then does statistical analysis on that and see how valid how valid this data actually is. So maybe it will push all of these back tests through 10 different validation tests. And then based on the score of how many of those validation tests did it pass, so let's say in order for it to pass, it has to pass at least 7 out of 10 validation tests, right? Then once it's passed, I will have out of these 70 ideas, maybe after going through this entire loop, I have maybe 5 ideas which have met this threshold. Then another agent goes and pushes those 5 ideas into live testing, where it goes and creates entry and exit rules, where it uses the exact same entry and exit rules from the back tests in the live testing, and it tests the execution of each of those ideas, where it tracks all of the live data with a certain amount of funds, and tracks the data with its own journal or something like that, and tracks the P&L. And then once the live test is complete, it will go and compare the live data with the backtest data or with the benchmark, and it will have some kind of process for creating a benchmark. Now, if the live data beats the benchmark that it's supposed to beat, let's say it creates a benchmark and say, okay, let's these 7 out the strategies which passed 7 out of 10 of these validation tests, they had an average performance of, let's say, 5% a month, right? Therefore, when something goes live, what we want to see is we want it to beat 2.5% a month for it to prove that it has some kind of edge. Because we're like putting some stress on this and saying, okay, let's say that some of these got lucky a little bit more, like they got the testing results got a little bit more lucky than normal just by pure coincidence. So we're going to use this as the benchmark. So if it beats this benchmark, then and only then does it have edge. Then once we've confirmed that something has that something does in fact have edge, then we can use a human to review that, and the human will manually scale it up based on the human's risk tolerance, and the human's understanding of why that edge is even there in the first place. But let's say the human doesn't understand why that edge exists in the first place. Maybe the human doesn't scale it up. Or alternatively, there's an AI agent which determines, based on the human's criteria, because the human has some kind of decision-making framework for how they determine whether or not they understand why an edge exists in that thing in the first place, or whether it makes sense for there to be a real edge there or not. Okay, example. I can understand to some extent why Friday would be the most bearish day of the week in the S&P 500, because maybe Friday is the day where people close out of their positions because they don't want weekend exposure, because the S&P doesn't trade on the weekends, and maybe they don't want to have that exposure to the gap risk for Monday open, and they'd rather just close out on Friday and then just rebuy on Monday. So I could make sense if Friday was the most bearish day of the week. But let's say Wednesday was the most bearish day of the week, and I'd be like, well, I have no idea why it would be Wednesday. So the data says it's Wednesday, but I have no idea why that would be the case, and I'm unable to draw like an obvious or a clear connection as to why that would be the case. Like, what is causing this anomaly? And if there's no like clean and really simple explanation for it, maybe I discard it. Right? So if I can have some kind of logic or decision-making process for how do we actually determine, like, sure, the data looks good, but do we actually understand why, or like what are the factors which are causing this data to be generated in this kind of way? And yeah, if we don't, if the AI, like if we give that logic to an AI agent and we just say, yeah, we just go gung-ho using my framework, then the agent can basically go and scale it up by themselves. But honestly, I think it makes sense for a human to do it. But yeah, that's basically how I would approach this one, which is like a behemoth of a task to do. But like, yeah, because this is like super complex. I think all of the other little stuff like live gathering data, I think that's like, the complexity of that is a lot lower than literally teaching an AI to trade for you and execute on your behalf, and even go the next step further, which is scale things up for you on your behalf. That's probably another like huge thing. But yeah, that's all of my logic on how I would use AI to improve my trading. And by the way, if you're serious about improving as a trader, I'd like to invite you into my free Telegram. Here's what you're going to get inside. You're going to get a 100-page guide on how I trade breakouts. You're also going to get a 214-page guide on how I trade reversals. And by the way, these two guides, I go really, really in depth with the strategies, with the theory, with the logic, and also I include like total combined within these two guides, there's more than 75 trade screenshots for you to study, like through just continuous repetition, and it's going to help you train that pattern recognition of seeing the exact same thing happen over and over again. Also, you're going to get a custom trading journal that I built, which makes it really easy for for you to track your trades, but also to review your trades. Like literally in the journal, there's a tab called educational resources. And in there, I have a template for reviewing trade screenshots and guide to show you the process for how to actually review your trade screenshots to improve your performance over time. And also a whole bunch of other stuff as well that I give out for free in my Telegram. So if that sounds interesting, click the link in the description to join.